Hi everyone, it's Fitz with the Daily Delivery. I hope you are doing well. I'm great. We had a PowerCat podcast recorded last night. It'll be up on the old site later today. But today I'm going to put on my full-fledged conspiracy theory hat. Because if you know me, if you follow me on X, I dig a good conspiracy theory. And boy, I got one about this creepy romance between ESPN and the SEC, and I got to share it. Please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I appreciate it so very much. We continue to grow. Engaging with these videos always helps. Man, the ESPN and Kirk Herbstreit in many ways, and the SEC, this romance has been unbearable for a while. But now that they own the contract for all SEC sports, ESPN isn't even trying to hide it. They're all in, and it's all about business. And I get that. It's best for their business if the SEC succeeds and dominates college football. If that happens, they got a bargain on the billions that they spent on the SEC. I think that's right. And you know what? It's a good bet because so far, they've known the outcome of the horse race, but now they've had a jockey change, and they don't know what to do about it because the SEC isn't going at the same speed it was before they expanded the playoff. So here is my theory. My theory is that this has been a long game. They've been basically China working on something that has stretched out. But once the playoff came into creation in 2014, it put this into a very fast pace. Why? Because we broke off 4 teams clearly above everyone else. There's no more voting, and we got BCS bowls, and they're all meaningful. And 4 teams will decide who's the national champion. And they immediately started wedging in as many SEC and Big Ten because they had interest in that at that point. And pretty soon it became about getting as many SEC teams in as possible. Now, what was the result of that? Well, it became pretty clear if you were a player of stature and you wanted to play for a national championship, you wanted that ring, you had to go to Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and maybe a few other programs. I guess Texas was in there, although they rarely competed for that standing. They started consolidating all of the greatest players in those conferences. Most notably the SEC, where the greatest high school football is also located. A huge advantage, but that is what it is. But now, the transfer portal is changing things. NIL is changing things. And while they can still buy players, they have a huge advantage of getting whatever player they really want. Ask a K-Stater if the NIL actually means you're going to have the best and most invested players. I would say no. It'll work sometimes, but I think any player going to the school with the highest bid ain't in it for the right reasons. And now we've got the transfer portal too. And the portal is really changing things. We're seeing backups at those schools, highly ranked dudes moving out and saying, you know what? I'm not going to play here. I'm not going to see the field. It isn't as cool as I thought. I'm going someplace to play. K-State just picked up an Alabama transfer with that very same story. So now they're bleeding talent, not top line talent, but the backups. They're not as deep as they used to be. And that transition from one season to another, once you've lost your backups, gets a little more sketchy. And they have to go into the transfer portal and bring in people that maybe aren't ready for their culture. Now you've expanded the playoff. And expansion of the playoff means that iron grip of being able to say, we're the only teams that you can play for and win a national championship. In reality, that's changed. And while I admit that the same teams are going to be at the top of that pecking order for a while because they've had the talent over the years and they still have plenty of talent on their rosters, now you can have access not just to the playoff, but a shot at winning the national title when you're at a school such as Arizona State, SMU, or even Penn State, which has been on the outside looking in. It changes everything. Now players can say, hey, I can actually go to these schools and have a shot at getting into playoffs, and maybe we're good enough to make something happen. But Kirk Herbstreit's latest comments make it very clear. They want one thing at ESPN. They want only the best teams by their definition into that playoff. He loves the idea that this Final Four is Penn State and Notre Dame and Texas and Ohio State. It's not as SEC heavy as they hoped, but they're still the biggest brands. And it doesn't change their plan that promotes the SEC over everyone else. But that is changing, and we'll see if that plays out over the long run. This was just the first year of the new college football playoff, expanded to 12 teams. What did we learn? The two lessons of year one is that first round is a blast when they're played on home fields, and a huge advantage for the home team because they're usually the favorite. And secondly, you're at an enormous disadvantage if you got a bye into the second round and played a team that just played about 10 days earlier. Every team with that bye lost. The solution is to get rid of byes, which means you go down to 8, which I'm sure is what ESPN might want to do, except they've got a contract for a lot of money. Or they might want to go up to 16. I personally think that's the way to go. More football, good times. Alabama gets to come in and play someone. I don't care if more SEC teams are in, because what are we finding out when they actually have to play in a meaningful game? And they're not the elite teams that have stockpiled all the talent, and a lot of that talent left Alabama with a coaching change. When that's not going on, everyone can play with everyone. Arizona State shouldn't have had a shot with Texas, but they did. And that ruins the storyline that ESPN and the SEC has been promoting for many years. I say this, expand it to 16. We know this year didn't work, but don't make it smaller and cut off access. That is not the lesson we learned from the first year of a 12-team playoff. We learned that we shouldn't have byes, and the best teams need to have the highest seeds, period. But I would, as I've said in the past, make sure the reward for being a conference champion is a home game, which might mean if you're the 10 seed playing the 7 seed in a 16-team bracket, you would be the home team. Some won't like that, but there has to be an award for having a great season and winning your conference. You see, ESPN wants to just kind of trim down college football to be their entity. And they want to keep around the Big Ten as, the bad guys, the Washington Generals. But that has not played out. Now we're seeing that the Big Ten at the top might now be better than the SEC. And honestly, that shocks me. But I'll say this, the SEC down the list of schools is better than the Big Ten. The SEC is the best conference. Don't get me wrong. The Big Ten's the second best conference. Don't get me wrong. But these changes to the game might have changed the entire formula and, honestly, challenged everything the SEC and ESPN have designed over the years. Let's give a 16-team playoff 10 years, like we did for the 4-team playoff. And let's see where we are. I may not be around when that happens, but I'll tell you this. I bet you all of college football will be better for it. And that's what we want. ESPN, man, they just want the profit. They want the money. And if they have to destroy something as American as college football along the way, they'll do it. Let's not let them.